In this episode of A Girl and a Gun, we bring you part 2 of our special Pick My Brain series on location sound recording. Today, we're talking mixers and recorders.
A Girl and a Gun, episode 34, recorded on 22nd of May, 2014, Sound Bites.
All you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Come along and join the party while we stare at the sun.
Hello, welcome to A Girl and a Gun, the show for filmmakers and content creators. I'm Phil Moore, and today we're going to do part 2 of our special Pick My Brain series on sound and microphones, and this time we're going to talk about mixers, so it's time to pick my brain. Hello, and today I'm actually joined by a fellow student at our course, Simon Bosson.
How you going,
Hello,
Phil?
Simon.
How you doing?
Now you've got a company that deals with design.
I do, yep.
But you actually also are a musician. You've got your own little home studio set up and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's correct, yep.
And we've been talking before this show at length about our respective sounds and the software and all the rest of it we use.
Yep.
So we're going to be picking both of our brains basically to talk about sound. Mostly what we're talking about today, however, last time we looked at microphones specifically, and John Maisels took us through all the different kinds of microphones there are. Today we're going to talk about what you can plug those microphones into. What you want to plug them into in terms of film production on set is a mixer and a recorder. Now what I have here, just to get the ball rolling, is an Asden mixer. So you can see here's a microphone. You can imagine this would be on a boom pole or whatever. This is plugged into over here. If I turn it up the other way. Inputs. We have 4 inputs on this mixer. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 XLR inputs on those. And if you can get in tight there, this is the one I've got the microphone plugged into at the moment. Down the bottom here, there are 2 little switches that go with each of these inputs. One is for phantom power down the bottom. So it turns phantom power on or off. And you remember from our last tutorial, we talked about phantom power as if you have a condenser microphone that requires its own power supply, the mixer can supply that. The other button we have here is a pad, and it says +4, I'm trying to read what it says here, +4, -30 and -5, I think. I can't even read the numbers there, but there's a pad there of different levels. So depending on the level of your microphone, how much power is going to the microphone, how much level and how quiet your source is, you set that pad to an appropriate level for your incoming source. This is a 4-channel mixer, and you can see on the front here, there's our 4 channels again. So if I can have up to 4 microphones plugged into this, right? They can be a condenser like this, they can be a dynamic, or they can be radio mics like the ones that we're wearing now.
Does this actually have its own battery pack?
Yes, it does. So
built in?
I haven't turned this on, so let's turn this on. On the side here, you've got the power. So if I turn that on, we'll have a little light come on the front here, and we just saw the level meters bounce there. I bang the microphone here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As you can see those VU meters bouncing there. So now it's got power. Yes, this runs off battery power, but also you can have DC. There's
Input
a
as well,
socket
yep.
there for DC input as well. Each of the 4 inputs has its own volume and pan control. So there's volume there, pan here. And as you can see, we have 2 levels because ultimately these 4 inputs go to a stereo output, 2 outputs only. And that comes on the other side here. So you can see I've got an output here. Headphones, always use your headphones so you can hear what's happening. So if you're doing location sound, you want to have these headphones on all the time so you can hear what you're doing. And I've got an output here which is going to nothing at the moment, but that will plug into our recorder eventually, right?
Can you adjust the amount of sound going in by looking at the level meters? Or?
Indeed. So that's what we have here. These are volumes here are for each of those, and we have a master volume control as well. That's for your inputs. And you can see as I'm talking there with the microphone down here, those meters bouncing. Now these are VU meters, right, which is different to the meters most people see these days, which are called peak level meters, the ones that, and we'll show those on the recorder later on. VU stands for volume unit, and it's. I remember this from the old days in the recording studios, and you'd have a 24-track, mixer with all these VU meters, and every track would have a VU meter. In those days, if it bounced into the red on that, and you're going to tape, usually that was okay. It's like you can saturate the tape, you can go into the red, let it
There'd be
technically
no distortion?
distort.
Okay.
Well, in a way, it depends. If it's like a guitar,
Yep.
it actually was a good distortion.
Okay. Yep.
And if you had that kind of tape saturation back in those days, depending on the sound, it actually was a good kind of, it did a kind of compression to you.
But with
for you.
vocals, you wouldn't want distortion, though, would you?
No,
Yep.
it is technically distortion.
Yep.
Quite right. If you go into that red, so that's what the red's for, to warn you that you're hitting the peaks there. But VUs are different to peak meters. So peak meters, if you hit that as they are, measure it as 0 dB,
Yep.
that top, that literally means on a digital recording, you are into distortion, and that is bad.
Yep.
Always avoid going into distortion on peak meters. This is more like your ears work, if you like. This is more a logarithmic scale, so it's not actually accurate in terms of a peak level meter,
Yep.
but it actually is more accurate in getting the general overview, the sense of the sound overall. So it's good to have both if you can.
Yeah.
To have these and a peak level meter at the same time. On the front here, you'll see each of these channels also has a built-in limiter. So there's a little button for each of these for a limiter. And next to that is HSF. Sorry. What does it say there? HPF, high pass filter. Right? So a high pass filter means that will pass the higher frequencies
Yep.
and roll off the bass effectively. So if you're trying to, especially on a film set, and you want to get rid of a bit of background noise, traffic noise, that kind of thing, roll off that bass, you're going for vocals primarily, for dialogue. High pass filter, you turn that on. The limiter, you know what a limiter is?
Yep.
Yes, so tell me what a limiter is.
It limits the amount of sound going into it as an input, doesn't it?
It's a form of compression, that's
Yeah,
right.
yep.
So it limits, this is one of the things that helps you avoid distortion.
Yep.
Turn that limiter on, and the mixer, if you have a really loud peak coming through,
Yep.
it will stop
Stop
that
it, yep.
and stop it hitting distortion, so it'll limit it at that point, exactly. So it's a form of compression that doesn't affect the rest of it, but stops it at that high level.
Now, with this mixer, this is mainly for video, isn't it? You wouldn't really use it so much for audio recording, like musicians?
No, not for
or-
music. No,
Yeah.
quite right. This is for video production, film production. This is the kind of mixer you would use on a film set. The camera's doing one thing,
Yep.
and nowadays it might be recording its own sound as a guide track. You would have a dedicated audio recordist
Yep.
on set, and they would have a mixer like this potentially, but this mixer is not a recorder. This doesn't record. You need a separate recorder.
Yep.
So back in the day, we used what was called a Nagra or a Nagra recorder, which was a reel-to-reel tape deck, which was about this big, little box.
Yep.
And this is, I remember working on film sets when I was acting, like in the 70s and 80s, and the sound recorders always had this Nagra sitting off the side. And this is why when they call for a film, you know, the camera rolling, sound speed, the speed meant the tapes have wound up and they're now running at speed. You know, they need
Yep,
time
had
to
to build
speed up.
up, yep.
That's why we say sound speed. Nowadays, it really doesn't matter.
Yep.
Digital recorder, it's on, it's off. But to record, and after the Nagras, everyone started to go to a DAT recorder.
So what does that do?
DAT is a digital audio tape recorder. That's what
Okay.
DAT stands for, in fact. And I found this in our storeroom. We don't actually have the tapes, but the tapes are about as big as a DV, if you remember DV cameras?
Mini DV, yep.
About the same size as a mini DV tape. So they're quite small. And a lot of people, when they first saw these, thought, look, it's half the size of a cassette. It's digital. I don't know if I trust this for, you know, serious sound recording on a set.
Yep.
But they turn out to be so useful and so reliable generally. People definitely did move over to the DATs. In fact, the feature film I made in 2005, my sound recordist was recording on a DAT in 2005.
Okay.
Most people at that point were starting to move to digital recorders.
So when did these actually come out?
Oh God, I used one like in the mid-80s. I worked on a computer game,
Yep.
and I bought almost this exact model, a Tascam DAT recorder,
Yep.
when they were the big thing. And I actually went to like Taronga's Park Zoo to record all the animal sounds.
Okay.
And they were going to become, I'd pitch shift them and do weird things to them, and they'd become the animal noises and the monster noises in this game I was
game,
working on,
yep.
you know. So yeah, in the 80s they became really big. By 2005, my audio recordist on that film was using this. She gave me the tapes, and when I whipped out my old one of this, it wouldn't play them. And I could not find anyone anywhere to convert those tapes for me, to digitise them for me. It became a real nightmare. I wish she just digitised them for me. I should have asked her to.
It's real old school then, isn't it now?
So, but no one uses this anymore. Nowadays, for recording, you can use something like this. This is a Fostex. field memory recorder. So this is a 4-channel recorder. You can plug your microphone directly into this. Okay, you don't have to have a mixer. That's where your microphone would go. You've got your analog in there for that, and you've also got analog out there. So that's what you can monitor with there, and there's your inputs here.
Is that similar to a 4-track recorder at all? I remember you're used to recording on a 4-track recorder.
Yes.
In order?
Oh, and this one happens to be stereo, but you can get 4-track, 8-channel versions of the
Okay,
same thing.
yep.
And this can be a kind of mixer. So you will see LEDs lighting up here on it. I don't have batteries in this that are charged at the moment, but it just takes a regular memory card there. And you've got the same kind of things here. We've got 16-bit, 24-bit recording, anything from 22.05 kilohertz up to 192 kilohertz. So that's the sample rate and the bit depth that this recorder supports.
Yep.
So mostly for video, we're talking 48 kilohertz, 16-bit.
Yep.
You'll know from music. What are you normally recording when you're doing music stuff?
192?
192.
Mm.
And what bit depth? 16 or 24?
24.
24.
Yeah.
So if you're serious about music, yeah.
Yeah.
24-bit, 96 kilohertz or 192 kilohertz.
Yep.
If you're really hardcore. And if you're serious about sound design, recording sound effects, they will record at those highest resolutions.
Yep.
Because it gives you, in the higher frequencies especially,
sound,
a
yeah.
lot more resolution and means you can pitch shift it. And
That's
there's
right.
frequencies up there that you never knew you had.
Yep.
Exactly. There is also, you can choose mono stereo here. Pre-record is really good because it means the recorder is actually always recording 5 seconds or 10 seconds worth, always on. And when you hit record here, those first 5 seconds get recorded to tape. So if you're a bit late
Yep.
or something happens and you weren't quite catching it, you will get those opening 5 seconds.
Okay, that's
It's
handy.
great if you're actually recording like kids or animals and suddenly they do something and, oh, got to get it, I missed it.
Yep.
Same thing, limiter, as we had on that. So we can limit the input coming. So I wouldn't do it twice, though. You pick one or the other if you're going through the mixer.
Yep.
Left and right line or mic. So if we've got a mic, bang, that's our microphone. Line would be from anything that's coming from a mixer, for example. This is dealing with the microphone. That then becomes a line input into the recorder.
Okay.
Yeah. And you have input levels and all of that. So that's a stereo recorder from Fostex, something a bit more serious. There are many other makers and brands and higher end levels, of course. Another option for recording, of course, is, and we've shown this before, is the Zoom, the H4n.
I know as a musician I've used them before. If you just have an idea of your head and you just want to have a little strum on your guitar and you just record
And
it
you
straight
do
on
into
in.
this, do you?
And they're so portable, yeah.
So do
Very-
you plug a mic in or just use the mics on the front?
The
for
ones that I've used, you plug it in, you actually plug it straight in.
Right,
So,
straight in.
yep.
Of course, you can see on here, in fact, you can put an XLR cable into that, like so, right? But you can see in the middle there, there's also an option for a regular phono plug, as per guitar
Yep.
lead, goes straight into that. So it can work either way. That then becomes a mic input. If it's a guitar, it's a line input.
That's right.
Simple as
Yep.
that, quite right. So this is a stereo recorder, but it can also do stereo microphones on the front. That's not a taser. Right? There's actually a stereo microphone on the front, which you would use for wild sounds, atmospheres,
Yep.
that kind of thing. And the reason that it's shaped like this, actually, is because so you get the microphone heads so close together to prevent them going out of phase with each other.
Okay. Yeah.
So if they're like this, for example, and you're talking at me,
Yep.
right, this microphone
You're only going to get that left
picks
side.
up slightly quicker than this microphone.
Yep.
They're slightly out of sync with one another because of the distance from your mouth. And when you play that back, those two channels played together can go out of phase and you get this strange hollow sound. So this is why we do this with them.
Okay.
Zoom actually have a more recent recorder which actually does do 4-channel recording. I want to get one.
Well, Zoom do guitar pedals as well. They do a
All
lot of
that, that's where they
guitar pedals,
started,
yeah.
absolutely, doing musical equipment, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, if you're on location with a film set, you want to be actually, if you're doing 2-system sound, which you should be doing, you've got your camera recording its sound as a guide track, then you've got your sound recordist with the microphone on a boom pole, and they will be going into a mixer, like the Aston here that we showed, or into a dedicated recorder. Now you can't really mix on these things. Now they give you levels and they give you basic input volume and stuff like that, but it's not really a mixer.
Yeah,
Even the
yeah.
Fostex wasn't really a mixer.
Yeah.
It's just a recorder, you know.
Good for portability, though, I suppose.
Good for portability. And you know, if you've got a dedicated person watching the levels and it's a fairly simple shoot, then these are fine on their own. If you're really serious, especially if you're dealing with multiple inputs,
Yep.
like if we had a boom and 2 radios, 3 inputs or maybe 4 inputs going to this, you need someone sitting there mixing it,
That's right.
watching those levels,
Yeah.
because they're all going to be doing different things potentially. Now, your background is in music production.
That's
How
right.
much of this kind of stuff have you ended up having to deal with in the past?
I've used it, as
So
I
you
said,
said you
yeah,
used the
the Zoom. More so of when I've been away, I'll take a Zoom with me. If I have an idea of a song, I'll just plug my guitar in, play a couple of little riffs, and then it's stored in there. And then later on, maybe a couple of days later, I can pick it up and still listen back to that, and then add to the recording.
But have you ever done any like recordings of the band or whatever live and had to deal with a live mix setup?
I have, yes. Yeah, we've used a 64-channel mixing board. That's probably the best that we've done. And that's out of that. With a drum kit, you've got endless mics
Well,
with
drum
the
kit
drum
itself,
kit.
yeah, it can have multiple
You know,
mics, exactly.
you can have 12 to 15 mics set up on
Yeah.
just on one drum kit. So
That's right. So this sort of stuff is like, this is 4-channel, you can get up to 8-channel. This is location sound recording. But as you say, if we're talking studio production, music production,
Yep.
you've got 24, 48, multiple channels, these massive mixing desks that
Yeah.
they use.
yeah, that's right.
And the same is true indeed for sound post-production. In fact, I wanted to finish up with this. We've got some examples there of some studio recorders on the screen. And we have Alan Parsons. Do you know Alan Parsons?
I know
Well,
Alan Parsons. I've heard of him.
What do you know of Alan Parsons?
Oh, that he had a lot to do with some very big bands, the
Well,
Beatles.
In fact, so he started out as an assistant engineer with the Beatles.
Okay.
Most famously, he was the engineer
Yep.
on Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd album, and he did later Pink Floyd albums as well.
Okay.
And he was also known for his own group, the Alan Parsons Project.
Yep.
So he's a producer, one of the original groundbreaking engineer producers that turned that into basically an art form, really.
Yeah.
I bring him up because there's a good profile of him on Premier Guitar. We had a profile there of Alan Parsons, but the reason I mention him is he's actually done a DVD series on the art of recording,
Okay.
the art and science of sound recording, a brief history of recording. Which, if you're interested in the background to all of this stuff and this technology, and going back to the old analog days and all of that, it's a really good series to have a look at. Let's have a look at a little bit of it right now.
The Beatles had a big influence on the way that recording technology developed. When they recorded Please Please Me, the whole album, amazingly, was recorded in a day. And as George Harrison famously quoted, the second album took even longer. In those days, they recorded on 2-track, quarter-inch tape. To make an overdub, or a superimposition, as Abbey Road called it, they would copy one tape to another while adding the new material. The rhythm track or instruments would usually be on track 1 and the vocals on track 2. These 2 tracks were then mixed down to mono for the final master. Somewhat hilariously, the 2-track tape was also released as a so-called stereo version, where the backing track was on the left and the vocals were on the right. Right up to Sgt. Pepper, stereo was just an afterthought, but Pepper was a big turning point. 4-track had arrived by then, along with the ability to overdub new material onto the same tape and remain in sync, a previously impossible feat. The complexity of the album involved huge engineering challenges, and Geoff Emerick was the recipient of a well-deserved Grammy for his work as engineer of the album. It's still hard to believe that it was recorded on 4-track.
So
By the
that's
time-
bit of how the Beatles did it. And as he said there, they're working in like mono, stereo. When they got to Sgt. Pepper's, it's like 4-channel. If you heard that album, that was recorded on a 4-track
It's
originally.
crazy, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
my God. And I used to work like that. I had a little Tascam Porter Studio, they called them,
Yep.
which is a cassette tape.
Okay.
And it's 4 channels.
Yeah.
And I would do that. I'd record vocals and bounce them down to different tracks and build up these layers and all sorts of things.
Yep.
I've got the old analog days. I'm so glad we're past them, frankly. Everything we do now is on computers.
Much easier now.
Yeah.
Eh?
That's kind of it for our show today. Last episode we talked about microphones in some depth with John Mazels. If you want to know more about microphones, picking up on that, there is also a really good video, The Art of Audio Recording Vocals, Choosing Your Microphone. This is part 3. If you just search for Choosing Your Microphone on YouTube, you'll find that video for more about microphones. And no doubt you'll find others searching for mixers. There it is, that's a video there. So it's a really good one, recapping what John did last week with our microphone special. Thanks for joining us. I wish we could talk
Thanks
more
for having
about
me.
music, but maybe in the next episode we'll get into that control room studio side of things.
No worries.
Thank you very much
Thanks
for
for
joining us.
having me.
Thank you all for watching. That has been our special edition of A Girl and a Gun, the Pick My Brain episode on location recording and mixing. Thank you all for watching. If you want to reach us, it's veronica@agirlandagun.tv. Email us there if you have your own Pick My Brain questions. You can tweet us @agirlandagun. But for now, thank you, Simon.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for watching. That's a wrap.
All you need to make a move